Okay, that's our signal to behave, Marie. Recording in progress. Check. Welcome, welcome.
Just waiting for everybody to get in.
Hello. Marie, I already have a New Year's resolution. I think we need to come up with a better theme song.
Or some dance moves. You're doing well, Blair.
Oh, this is going to be great. Exactly.
Okay, stop, Blair.
All right, fine. Showing my age. I get it. Just give it another minute or so as people are joining us.
All right, let's get started. Welcome to our sixth McKinsey Unpacked episode. For those of you who are joining for the first time, I'm Marie.
And I am Blair. And together,
Exactly, we have the pleasure to co-lead McKinsey's global recruiting efforts. And with this monthly Unpacked session, we want to share a bit more about the behind the scenes of McKinsey. And Unpacked doesn't really have the name from, our consultants who travel quite a bit to be shoulder to shoulder with our clients. And maybe that is a topic, Blair, for one of our next episodes to ask our guests about their travel hacks. But
I love that.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
I'm sure they have good ones. But we want to unpack a bit the myth of McKinsey and look behind the scenes.
That's right, because Marie and I both have spent many years in talent attraction and as part of our firm, and we are constantly amazed at the sort of misperceptions that are often out there. So we're on a mission to share the real McKinsey that we know and love with all of you.
And we've both been here for 21 years, so
we have. So together we're
a lot of stories to share.
You will discover, if you're not familiar with McKinsey, we like things in threes. That's sort of a thing. So we actually have three sections to our discussion today. The first is roadmap. So what's on our mind, where we're sort of headed, what we're thinking about these days. The second one is actually unpacking the suitcase. So getting underneath the particular topic. And today we're actually going to talk about trust, which I think is a pretty interesting and far-reaching topic with the perfect guest to be interesting and far-reaching. And then the third section is snack for the road, where we know Marie has kids a bit younger than mine. There is a cardinal rule as a parent of young children: you never go on a trip without snacks, like ever. And so that's where we leave you with a piece of advice or a tip, something to take away post our discussion. So Marie, let's kick it off. What's on your mind today, my friend? What's the roadmap?
What's on my mind? Definitely year end, which is both delightful and stressful. Exactly, yeah. Because there's a lot that still needs to be wrapped up before the end of the year. But I always enjoy the end of the year because it's a time to reflect and to look back what the year's been like and what has happened out of the plans. And I remember when we were thinking about this little series that started with an idea, and now it's the sixth one already. So I was reflecting a little bit in preparation for this session what we've talked about in the past months, and we had some interesting guests.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, we started with John Chartier, who's a partner in the US who has the best nickname at the firm because he goes by the nickname of Charts, which of course is very fitting for a consultant.
Pretty good.
We talked about what it's like to be in a team room at McKinsey and how we are thinking about putting together the teams. Then we got insider tips into our recruiting process from Ashley Schloss, which was a very popular episode. Then we talked with Nora Gardner about the gift of feedback and how it has helped her grow over the years and what feedback she cherished and which she, maybe ignored or redirected a little bit. And
Spoiler alert, if you go back and watch that recording, she may or may not have gotten feedback that she was too short at some point in her career, but we'll just leave it at that.
Don't give it away. And then the last one was with John Cantor, who is the office manager of our Manila office. And with him, we spoke about how we're thinking about communities within the firm and outside of our firm. So some interesting episodes. If you weren't able to tune into the last ones, you can find them on the website, and we're going to share the link after this session today. But today, you said it already, we have the honor of welcoming a very special guest to talk about something that
Let's
is
not say too special, or he's going to come in. His head's going to be really big. He's going to think he's a big
He's already
shot.
smiling. I can see it.
Let's
He's
keep
going
it
to
up for
talk
tomorrow.
about something that underpins everything we do at McKinsey within our firm and with our clients, and that is trust.
Yes. So without further ado, we will welcome our guest, Eric Kutcher. Eric is a senior partner here at the firm. There he is, and is also
Hello, Eric.
hello, Eric,
Hello.
our
On the
chair
hot
for
seat.
North America.
Can we
Eric,
go back to packing tips? Because I have a bunch.
okay, let's start there. We're gonna go
Well,
snack
you
on the
can
road
save that
first.
for snack for the road, Eric.
No, let him give one. Let him give one as a preview. What's a good one?
So the single best thing I found packing is they have these, I think they're made by Ziploc. They're these vacuum bags that you can squeeze out. So I put
Yep.
all my old gym stuff in it on every trip and I can just like squeeze it and put it away. Save space.
Smart. Keeps
It
it
is. It's
dry,
amazing.
makes it less, less bulky.
Exactly.
Pro tip. Guys, you heard it
Other
here
one
first.
is you stuff your shoes with all your undergarments so that you don't have to worry about shoe trees and things like that and save space.
That I do. That's a good one. Guys, this is already the most valuable unpack we've had so far. So stick with us. It's going to get even better. Besides being a master packer, Eric has been with McKinsey for 27 years. He has been a client leader, helping our clients solve some of their most complex technological and strategic issues. But I actually think among all of the impact that Eric has had, one of the greatest is he is a masterclass in speaking authentically and openly about who we are and what this place means. It's not perfect, so it's definitely not easy, but it's special. And I think Eric has been incredibly open in sharing his own experience at the firm through various geographies, through various leadership roles. And we're really excited to have him here today to help us unpack the topic of trust, which I really think underpins everything we do here, again, both as individuals and collectively. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you. It's going to be hard
Yes.
to live to that. I'm not going to lie.
Well, we'll start you easy, Eric. So
Yeah,
maybe
Thank you.
totally.
I
exactly.
appreciate it.
We'll smooth and easily. So tell us a bit more. What got you here, and what made you stay for so many years?
So here's the story how I got here. I had every intention my entire life of becoming a medical doctor. My father was a surgeon. I was sort of grown up in that world. That's what I was going to do. And in fact, I was not a kid who read a lot. I was not a kid. I played video games and I played sports. That's kind of what I did. And as a result of playing a lot of sports, I broke a lot of bones, like a lot of bones. I broke my nose 6 times. I've been in 9 short arm casts. I broke my collarbone 3. I legitimately, if I grew up today, there is no question my parents would have had family services call. Like there is no doubt about it when they saw my file. And this orthopedic surgeon that I used to go to for all these injuries was the US ski team doctor. And he promised me that if I went to medical school, I could become the US ski team doctor. So that is literally when I went to college, like that is what I was going to do. And for those that have ever thought about becoming a medical doctor, at least in the US, you've got to take the MCATs, right? That's the standardized exam. And then I've studied and I'm ready. And I spent 2 summers taking extra classes and I'm like all gung ho. The night before I go take the MCAT, I get violently ill. So I wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I then go meet my friends to grab breakfast and I just grab a ginger ale. And I go into the exam and I am violently ill in the exam. I get up to be ill and they excuse me from the exam for being a distraction. And if you know anything about the MCATs, that means you have to not take them again until like August. And if I don't take them until August, I miss round 1s. And so I had this whole summer where I was trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do with my life? Because like I'm clearly not going to follow the plan I had outlined for years. And it was like during that summer, I realized like all the things that I loved that I was doing in college had nothing to do with me becoming a doctor. And everything to do with me kind of getting into the world of business. And then frankly, all my friends that I had kind of grown and done these things with were all going into consulting and banking. And so I said, I'm going to go do those things. And I also had a bit of a chip on my shoulder because I wanted to show them that I could do what they couldn't do. And so none of them had gotten an offer from McKinsey. So that was kind of my goal. I remember telling my dad,
Not
Dad, I think I'm not going to go to
competitive at all.
medical school.
Yeah,
I'm
I've
going to go,
never
not at all. If you
noticed
know
that
me, not at all
competitive streak.
competitive.
No,
And so
that's
I
weird.
said, Dad, I'm going to go, I want to go work for McKinsey. He goes, what's McKinsey? I'm like, I don't really know, but I know none of my friends have gotten offers. So that's my objective. And I decided really I was going to do consulting during an interview where I had an interview with a bank. I won't name the bank. And I sat there and I had 5 managing directors from that bank that were going to interview me. And they all asked me the same question. And in the middle of the third interview, I said, I don't have a better answer than I gave to the last two guys. And so if you really only going to ask me that question, I either gave you the best answer, in which case, if I'm wasting your time, if that answer wasn't good enough, but I know I'm not enjoying the interview, so therefore it's wasting my time, and I got up and left. Like I just walked out of the interview partway through.
Voting with your feet.
I'd had my interview with McKinsey the same day, and I kept thinking about the cases and the questions and the people, and that's what brought me here. That's what brought me here. I was super excited during the interview process itself. What has kept me here all these years is different. I will share a story that is more recent because you have different moments in time. And Blair, I think, heard the story, and it's unfortunate the story is going to be online because that means Bob, our managing partner, may actually hear it. I don't think I've actually shared this with him yet, but
what could go wrong, Eric? What could go wrong?
Nothing could go wrong. Nothing at all. It's okay. It's career limiting, but that's all right. So I had been the CFO before I did this job, and that was the hardest job I had. It's what I said is I've run to work. I'm 27 years. 25 of those years I ran to work every day. And if you talk to my wife or my kids, they would say, like, there was never a day when dad didn't come home happy. Like I loved what I was doing. And then there was about an 18-month period where I was CFO that frankly, I went to work purely out of obligation. I didn't have a day that I enjoyed. And I hadn't really thought about it. And until I'd kind of gotten to this point where a friend of mine who's the CEO of a very large public company said, I want you to come in and be my number two. And, he put an offer on the table that was pretty hard to say no. And I was at this emotional low, right? I was at this real emotional low. And if you ask my best friend in the firm, who happens to be my best friend in life, he would have said to anyone, Eric's leaving. Like he's run his course. I was turning 50 this year. My daughter went off to college. I have two more at home, one which is only going to be home for it was sort of the moment where I was like, okay, the time's kind of run. It's run its course. And I was sitting with that CEO as he saw I was struggling to make the decision and say yes. And he said, I really need you to decide if what you want to do every day is what we're going to do. And we've talked to you about what the day-to-day job's going to look like. And what I realized in that moment is that's not what I wanted to do. And what I have is this incredible privilege. And that privilege is, I said my best friends in this world are at this firm. Right? And they are all over the world. And there's no other institution I have ever seen where you go to work every day with your best friends. And some of those best friends are at McKinsey, and some of those best friends are at my clients. So the first thing for me was, where else do you get the joy of going together? And it drives my wife crazy because anytime I go to a McKinsey partner meeting, like normally on a Friday night or Saturday night, Friday nights I fall asleep at like 8:30 on the couch after dinner. And on Saturday nights, we're out with friends. And like by 9:30, 10 o'clock, I'm looking at my watch, I'm kicking her under the table. I'm like, it's time to go home. If I go to a McKinsey partner meeting, it's like 4 a.m. and I still haven't gone to bed because I'm hanging out. Like there's just something about the magic of that friendship that doesn't exist anywhere else. Second thing is I literally get to interact with the most amazing people, right? Forget about my friends. Like I've been super fortunate. There are 2 business analysts right now that are kind of working as chief of staff to me in this North America role. Like I would go work for them tomorrow. This is the most talented set of young colleagues I've ever witnessed. And by the way, that's 2 of 25,000 colleagues that are consulting that are like literally all that talented. Where else can you go that you get that level of talent? Nowhere else I've ever seen. Nowhere else I've ever seen. And then when you take that talent, you take friends, and then you get to work on the most interesting problems in the world for some of the most interesting institutions on this planet, you sit there and go, that's a privilege. It's a privilege to change the world through our clients with a set of folks you care about, client and McKinsey. Like you don't get to do that anymore. And so I kind of went from I can go do this other job and it'd be really rewarding, but this is a privilege. Like this gives me a purpose. And so that's what, and every other time I've thought about leaving, some part of that story has come up that has said it's just the wrong time. I can't leave. I can't imagine waking up tomorrow and not going to work with my best friends. I can't imagine not being able to work on these problems. So that's kind of been it for me.
I love that, Eric. And I think, for those of us joining today that don't have a 27-year career under their belt at this point, right? I
realize some people on this call won't even have been alive for 27 years, but keep going.
You know what? And that just makes us seasoned veterans, that we have so much to offer and give to the next generation. So we can really lean into our apprenticeship here. But I wonder, as you were first starting out your career, in particular, you were entering an industry that you had not expected to be in. You also said quite explicitly, none of your friends came to McKinsey with you. So you had to build those relationships starting out. How did you do that? how did you think about sort of building meaningful trust-based relationships with colleagues, which I think in lots of different places that just doesn't happen. What did that look like for you at McKinsey, and what did you have to do? What sort of part of that did you own?
Yeah, so it's a really, it's funny because it actually just feels somewhat natural in the way it happens. I
Okay.
mentioned I had a lot of short arm casts. I had a lot of broken bones. I went to the orthopedic surgeon all the time. And part of that was
I loved your chip on the shoulder analogy. I was like, oh, good one. Good one. That checks out.
I always played team sports. And so at some level, there is nothing kind of that brings people together more than when you are sitting side by side and you're in this difficult moment and you can achieve together. Like you are sort of drawn to each other. And at some level, that's what you do every day at McKinsey. And so you go to a team room, you go with a set of colleagues, you are there morning, noon, and night for months at a time. And there's a natural bond that happens in that team room, in part because someone cracks a joke, in part because when you're eating dinner together, someone will say something that'll be super memorable. Part of it's the care you take to help each other out, to make sure we're winning together, to celebrating those moments of success, but also realizing there are real moments of low, but you do it together. And so the part of building friendships was actually never hard because it's sort of thrust upon you in the fact that you're in this team. I think the hardest part about maintaining the friendships, right? And building, because the teams come to a natural end.
Yep.
And then you don't necessarily see each other every day. And I think that's the part where the folks that I've stayed with and been friends for a long time, it's because I've done things with for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, and it's over many years. And so there's natural ability to kind of sustain. I think, unfortunately, there's also a lot of people that I absolutely adored that I became super close with in that moment. But it's like changing schools. Like all of a sudden, it's just not quite as there. But I think a lot of it was the trust got built because you were in something really substantive together.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't call because we had a, random lunch on a random day. It's because, some people call it the foxhole. But when you're in a team room, like for, 8, 10, 12 or more hours a day, like you get to know people. You get to know, and so I think that's what it was for me.
I love that. I love that mix of sort of organic and purposeful, right? The organic part is, I think to your point, when you're being really stretched with a group of people and you have a purpose and you're contributing, you do get to know each other on such a deep level. But I love your point that it's really up to you, right? You move on and you have so many concentric circles of tribes, so to speak, at McKinsey that we move around, and it really is up to you to kind of stay connected to those tribes,
Totally.
which is hard.
And you talked already a little bit about clients, Eric. We talked now about colleagues and how you've built relationships with colleagues. Shifting to clients, how have you approached that? How do you build strong trust-based relationships with our clients, which is super important? And then maybe also to make it a bit more difficult, the second part of the question, how has your approach changed over time? Like we said, right? We have some people on this call that are maybe starting out in their career and that would join McKinsey as a business analyst. Like, how have you built relationships as a business analyst versus today as a senior partner leading North America?
All right, so I'm going to talk more about my time as a partner, and then I'm going to go backwards in time to try to remember what it was like when I was a business analyst. Probably three things that kind of have been, we often talk about servant leadership in the context of our firm. Like one of the things we will talk about, there's a big difference between being a leader and being a servant leader. And almost by definition of being in client service, you have to learn to be a servant leader. And there's sort of three things that were within the kind of concept of servant leadership that I have always found to be true. Maybe it's four. I'll go with four. I'll break the McKinsey,
Okay.
So number one, I've just learned over the years, if you can't create a personal connection, right, it's very hard to build a real relationship. And so I have learned that I stopped trying. Like if there isn't going to be that personal spark, if there isn't going to be that point of connection that goes beyond the immediate question or problem, I will find someone else that'll be a better connection. So I don't try to do it to people for which there's not a natural something beyond just the moment. That's kind of number one. Number two is, I think a lot of this comes down to, do you care? And I never started a meeting with my agenda, or I really try not to. I always sort of start with what's on their mind, right? Because the more I can get them to open up, the more I can find a way to be helpful, whether it's in the project we're doing or just in kind of the developing of the relationship. I want them to think about me as helping them be successful over the long term and the care I take. And so a lot of this is always, I mean, I find the common bonds, and usually it starts in some conversation. For me, it could be talking about my New York Yankees. And if I happen to have another Yankee, like there's something in there that just kind of naturally happens. And then there were two things that I was taught a number of years ago that really, I believe, are critical to being great client leaders and building those relationships. Number one is you are long-term urgent, right? Which means you never focus on what has to happen tomorrow or in the short run, but you treat it with the same pace as if, over the long run. So they know that you're present there, you're there with them. And then the second part of that is you run to trouble. And I'll tell a story about a colleague of mine, and it was really telling. And I remember watching and learning from it. I thought it was magic. But there was a CFO, actually, I'll name the colleague, it's Laura Korb. Laura Korb was counseling this CFO of a particular cable company. And that cable company fired the CFO, right? And Laura literally called that CFO and she went to his house, and she would go to his house consistently for months, right? Just to make sure he was okay, just to make sure that she was able to help him think about what he did next, all of that. The day he got announced in the CFO of a new company, a very sizable company, everyone picked up the phone and called him, right? Every bank called him, every consulting firm called him. You know who he picked up the phone and called? Laura. Because Laura ran to trouble. Laura was there in his moment of need. And I will tell you, one of my proudest moments is I had a CEO who, by the way, 10 days earlier had been given a, new contract and a huge bonus. And, in the middle of a fight with an activist, they fire him. And the second phone call he made was to me, right? Called his wife, and then he called me. And like that told me how much the care I'd taken for him had mattered to him, and how in that moment of need, he was like, he knew I would be there for him. And so that's a lot of how I learned to do that. And I think, by the way, you can start that very early on, because a lot of those lessons, I think, are relevant from the day you show up. When you meet the person on the client team, like, don't walk in and say, I need X, Y, and Z from you.
Yeah.
Ask them what's going on in their lives. Ask them what else they have on their plate. Figure out what you can do and bring them that can be helpful. I was super lucky that my client that I've now served for 27 years used to be about a 30 or 40-minute drive from the office. And so I just scheduled lunches with the two client leads that were on my very first client for years. And I would show up. By the way, I never served those individuals again, but I knew them. Right. And so it was one of these things where I think you can do a lot of those things very early on. The hardest thing is, at least for me, it was, I joined the firm, I was 22 years old, almost 23. My first client team members were like 52 and 64.
I was going to
Like, they were
ask that,
old
right?
enough to
That's
be
very,
my,
totally.
right.
How do you think about
And
building
so,
trust with that? You're on a different plane in some respects.
at some level, I don't know that I built trust, but I think in many ways it was not the trust that I have today as a peer. It was like, they looked at me as like,
Respect.
gosh, this is a really young kid who I really like. And by the way, he's energetic and he's like trying to help me. And I love the fact that he's trying to help me. And I know, and like, that was okay, right? That was okay. And by the fact that I helped them and I did good work for them, helped them kind of build trust in a way that was much more kind of in that mode as opposed to as a peer and counselor. But that just changes over time. And I think that's okay.
I love that. I love
I
that
think
sort of
that,
the authenticity, right?
yeah.
It's authenticity that is really the kernel of that. When you're younger tenured, then you earn the right, I think, to be a counselor, and you earn the
Yeah.
Authenticity and really showing up, wanting to help the people. I love the example you gave, Eric, to ask people, what's on your mind? How can I be helpful? What could I share with you that could really be of interest to you, versus just viewing it as a transactional relationship where you maybe need to get data from to continue on
Clients
the
are
work
people.
stream.
Clients are people. I mean, remember, we are in a people,
Totally.
we are in a people
Yes.
industry. Like,
Yes.
it is about, and you build relationships because you care, right? And they see that you care, and they really see that you have very low self-orientation.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things, Eric, I've heard you speak about in really compelling ways is how caring can mean delivering tough messages sometimes, right? Caring is not just, hey, I discover things we have in common and we're going to go, shoot the breeze about the Yankees and it's going to be great. Sometimes it's, hey, I actually need to tell you something, a strategy that you're trying to implement is wrong, or you're not thinking about this in the right way. How has trust helped you deliver hard messages sometimes? Are
I'm
you
only
laughing because you're
smiling
going to give one
because
of us feedback? Okay.
no, not at all. I'm laughing because my kids gave me for my 50th a case of really bad wine that they had a label created for me. Right. So it has my own label on it. And at the bottom of every bottle, bottom of every label, it says one of the things that they have picked up that I often say. Right. So they're like little Ericisms. And one of them is actually not from me, but it's from them. And it says, my dad's not an asshole. He just tells the truth.
But wait, why couldn't they give you that message with a case of good wine? Just asking.
I think they didn't
For a
want to
friend.
buy it. I think they want to spend the money on the good
Okay,
wine.
fine,
So they,
fine.
so I always tease clients that like a bit of my charm is I have no problem hitting you upside the head with a 2x4, right? I'm just going to tell you how it is. And I think because I've spent the time to get to know people and because I've built the trust, when I ask the tough questions or I really push back on them,
Yep.
I think they respect that it's coming from the right place. And I don't think anyone that has met me would suggest that I am ever holding back what I really believe. And I think if I followed all the right lessons that McKinsey was supposed to have taught me that never quite got through to me, I would have learned to do it through the right kind of questions. But like that's just not me. And so I, more than anything else, will, I push people, I help them, I help really get them to try to think differently, sometimes by painting a different picture, sometimes it's by giving them direct feedback. And that is risky at the beginning. I think over time, because I interact so much with friends,
Yep.
You learn to give feedback, you learn to get feedback.
Who gives you
And
feedback, Eric, outside of your kids who are
Well, clearly my kids do, because there's a case of wine
outside
with
of
all
that.
these sayings.
love that's amazing.
And clearly my wife does too, because she has no trouble giving me feedback in a very public forum as often as she can.
And in the work
I think,
context, how do you ensure you get
yeah.
feedback?
So somebody like I talked a little bit about, I have a lot of these friends. I've got friends that have really given me feedback. I've got, I probably have two in particular that one is not afraid to just give it to me straight. And and sometimes it can be pretty hurtful, but he gives it to me straight. The other is really more of my psychologist in the firm, and he really tries to expand the way I think about things, and as a result, makes me realize where I'm falling short. And I think those two. Now, I also get feedback. I got feedback from 3,000 partners not that long ago. I think, Marie, you may have participated in that. I know Blair went through multiple. So
Yes,
for those that don't know,
that was
in
I
my
have
brilliant.
an
very
obligation
last,
to engage, Eric. I
would
have an
you
obligation to engage.
would you like to tell the story?
No, you should. You should.
Oh,
So,
Eric, this is such a good story to tell.
No.
So we had a global owners meeting, a partner meeting in Copenhagen earlier this year, and Eric had the really enviable job of opening up the session. And it was at a moment where we had a couple thousand partners who were there, and there'd been a lot of really healthy but very vociferous and spirited debate over some strategic choices that we had made as a firm financially. And Eric got up to address everybody as the CFO. Eric, I'll let you take it from here because I think how you thought about, diffusing the crowd was pretty brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so just a couple other points. I mean, there were a lot of people in the partnership that were not as happy with me as I might have liked them to be. Is maybe the nice way of saying it. And when Bob had asked me to do this, to open this conference, like we should be in this moment of like positivity, and Bob had just become, just won the managing partner election, and we should be kind of moving forward. And he goes, Eric, I need you to open this. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Like, how can I possibly open this? Like, this is the mood setting. And like, you want me to go give an update, which isn't all that inspiring. And like, that's not the right way to do this. And I was really struggling. And so I went up on stage and I said, as I walked up there, I said something to the effect of, look, this relationship between you, which is really the 3,000 people sitting in the stands, and me, it hasn't been so good. So I decided to buy you all a gift. And if you reach underneath your chair, you will find your gift. And they all went underneath their chair and they pulled out what were stress balls. And I said, before you all say, Kutcher, why the heck did you get me a stress ball? That's not the gift. I said, but on the count of 3, you are all going to throw that ball at me. And I played baseball and I had a catcher's mask and I quickly ran and put the catcher's mask on and I said, 1, 2, 3. And 3,000 balls came pummeling down on top of me. But the level of laughter and kind of emotional relief
It's
in that
brilliant.
moment was
It was amazing.
But it was real feedback because 3,000 people threw balls at me.
Sure.
Without
But you were vulnerable
hesitation.
enough. You were
Without hesitation.
vulnerable enough to
Some
invite
did
it.
it before I even invited them to. Just to
That
be
is
clear.
true. That is true. I just love the idea of you going through, customs and security with a catcher's mitt in your bag. Everyone's like, that's awkward. I wonder what that guy's going to do. But it was amazing. It was amazing moment of vulnerability, which I think everybody really
And levity
appreciated.
also, right? It just
Humanity,
diffused the-
vulnerability, and just saying, hey, sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't get it right, but we trust each other enough to be accountable and have real grown-up conversations about it as we're chucking balls at each other's heads, namely one, which was strangely
It was
satisfying.
pretty
Eric, but that's
legendary,
another
I have to
session.
say. It was pretty legendary. Talking about legendary, I mean, something that's on our minds at McKinsey right now a lot, right, is our 100-year anniversary, which is coming up very soon. And we've said, look, Eric, you've had a fantastic career of 27 years here, and some of the people on this call might not even have been born by the time we all joined the firm. Looking back at your journey, what has changed about McKinsey and what has stayed the same?
It's almost easier to answer that question, Marie, with what is stay the same, because
Yeah.
I think in many cases most things have changed. I think the reality is what has stayed the same is the core ethos of who we are, right? Which is really about our purpose, our mission, and our values. And I think those things are evergreen, they're everlasting, right? I think the idea of what we do is we aim for enduring impact at clients and really differentiate impact, and we build a firm that attracts, develops and retains the best people on earth, and we do that across all the different ways that we need to deliver that impact on everyone. Those two things are inextricably linked. You can't be a great client service firm and not have the best people. You can't be a great, people factory, if you will, and not actually give people the opportunity to apprentice by doing the craft and having the type of client impact. You can't do the two without each other. And then underneath that, there's a set of values of how we do that I think have endured. And I think that is what is so amazing about anywhere you go across the globe, and it truly is global. That is what you find. When I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, which was very unexpected, I sat in the office the first day and it felt like home. I was 3,000 miles away from home, and that doesn't sound that far. It's the same country I get, but it was like my wife didn't have that experience. My wife was like, why am I living here? This is miserable. I have no friends. And I walk into the office and like everything from the phone working the same way to like my values being up, which are over there. Like it's one of those things where it is quite remarkable. Now, what has changed is everything. Like when look, not to really date myself, but like this whole internet thing, like it didn't exist when I started at the firm. Like, it really didn't, because you
Fax
couldn't
machine.
access anything. So yeah, by the way,
Totally.
thermal fax machines, like, so you had to stand by the fax machine to get the page while it was still hot and then go make
Yes,
a
you did.
photocopy, because
Yes,
if it
you did.
cooled down,
Yes,
it
you
actually
did.
lost its ink, right? Or, what we all call Google searches, which I realize is already old, right? Relative to what we can do today. Like that was, you called the local librarian in the local
Oh, yeah.
office and you gave them 5 words or 10 words to go search on. And then by the time you got back to the office or your house, there were literally a stack of papers this thick. Like what hasn't
True story.
changed, right? The work we did was all about delivering the insight that kind of painted a view as to where you go strategically or organizationally. It certainly didn't talk about how we actually deliver on the impact. It didn't talk about how we built the capabilities, right? I mean, we are a totally different firm. When I joined the firm, we barely had an operations practice. We barely had a marketing and sales practice, right? I remember when we really decided to get into digital, I was already 2 or 3 years into the firm. If you look at the work we do, the how we do it, the types of people, you all know this better than I do, but where we go look for talent is totally different than where it used to be.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Totally.
so I think in some ways, when I talk to alumni and I say, and they say, what the firm is nothing like what they left. Unfortunately, most of the alumni leave and it's like the firm froze in their mind in that moment.
Totally.
Well, there's nothing about that firm that they remember that is the same.
Yep.
Except for the mission, the purpose, and the values.
which is such a strong fundament. I love how you said that, and it's totally true. It's completely the same. And actually, I mean, there was a task force, right, looking at the next century. Do the values still apply, or do we need to change something? And they said no. I mean, they perfectly still apply today, and those are the ones that we want to carry in the future.
I completely agree.
I think the other thing, Eric, that your story about moving from East Coast to West Coast and it still feeling like home. I think that's something that we often talk about a lot as McKinsey people, that there's a sameness and a familiarity and sort of an ethos that we all share. And it's funny when we're articulating that to candidates, sometimes they think, well, that sounds creepy. Are you guys all alike? Like, is it, some sort of cult that everybody is the way, like, how do you think about that, Eric? How do you articulate a McKinsey person or McKinsey people?
So
Who
it's
are
funny that you say cult. So so this is now somewhere in 2000 time period, so it's 24 years ago. And my wife and I had been dating for a handful of months, and there was a sort of celebratory weekend away for those that had committed to do a lot of what was then recruiting, now talent attraction, for the office I was part of. And so she had never come with me to any sort of event because we'd only been dating kind of a handful of months. And she comes, and I go back to the room from a meeting that I'm in, and she's literally in the room on the phone crying to her mother. And she goes, "Oh my God, I think he's part of the firm." And I realized folks on the phone, on the video may
Exactly. I
not
was
know,
like,
but
that's a vintage film.
there's a
People
book
do
and
not
a
know.
movie, and Tom Cruise is in the movie all about
It's a
the
talking
firm.
movie, though, guys. It's a talking movie. Don't
And not black and white.
Yes. It did, yes, it was in color. Yes, it wasn't that long ago. But so like there is something about that ethos, and like, I mean, it's incredible. Like I joked that I was going to give you 4 earlier, but like McKinsey we talk in 3s. And it's like you don't even know how not to do that over time. And I just
That
think
sounds
it's,
creepy.
it's the reality is the vast majority of people at our firm start very early in their careers. Very few come in laterally. Very few come in laterally. And so you kind of grow up in this ethos. And like I sort of tease, I spent the first 15 years of my adulthood, right, from the time I was 22 to the time I was 37, in this office in Connecticut. Like the folks that were senior partners at some level were almost like second parents, right? And so like you looked up, and so you learned in many ways the way they behaved, because it is such an apprenticeship model. And so how do you define the care? I mean, look, at the end of the day, the characteristics, you have people that care, they're incredibly brilliant, they work super hard. If they're good, they have interests outside the firm. They are overachievers. We will sometimes say insecure overachievers.
Yep.
And I never knew if I liked that term, but it probably does talk about many ways who we are, especially those that kind of grow up here. Again, I look at my friends, I think of these folks as they care deeply. They believe in the mission, right? They do believe in the mission. I think that is so strong. And I think that comes from, we all grew up here. I mean, think about it. I'm 50 years old, 27 years at the firm. That's more than half my life. Even I can do that math.
Yeah. I bet you can do a little bit more than that. By the way, that's an insider tip, that if you ever send as a former business analyst, you ever send numbers to Eric, you will get questions on the numbers. So we tend to talk in, big illustrative conceptual terms now, no numbers, which is great. I love that, Eric. And I think, you mentioned earlier how we look for talent from such wildly different places than we did even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago. And I think that speaks to what you are saying is we look for common qualities, but the life experience that people bring is wildly different, right? We have people who come from backgrounds in aeronautics. We have folks who grew up thinking they were going to be a doctor their entire life. We have folks who didn't complete a degree, someone who's a deep technologist. And I think that's part of the magic too, is there's this sameness that binds together inherently really different, interesting people, which I think that mix, at least for me, has been one of the sort of secret sauce ingredients for being here for 20 years.
Yeah, and that's the same everywhere, right? That's always the impressive thing. You go in an office in the US or in Europe or in Asia, and you see these same qualities everywhere, even though country cultures might be different and experiences and backgrounds might be different.
I probably think of this the wrong way, but in some ways the firm, we're in 62 countries, I think it is, right? We've got 125 or 30 offices. and it's a large institution. It's large enough that in many ways it feels like a society, right? It actually feels like it is a bit of its own society, with real obligations of citizenship, and but the ethos of the individuals all believe in the same thing, which is super powerful. It is actually
Yeah.
quite amazing to see, no matter where you are, the allegiance to the firm. And by the way, that often, not always, often carries well beyond when people are at the firm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think that's actually, Marie, that's a good idea. We should bring some of our alumni on an upcoming event too, to talk about how McKinsey has sort of shaped their post, industrial world, in terms of how the threads of the common values, the mission, the purpose carry through to what they do later in life.
There's
I
a
feel like
question which I'm just looking at the Q&As, and there's a question talking a bit about the outlook for McKinsey as we are entering into the next 100 years. Any words of wisdom on that, Eric?
Yeah, so I can't speak for what the next 100 years looks like, because
No, that's okay.
that's probably beyond anything reasonable. I actually believe we're about to have one of the great decades in the firm's history, and I am super optimistic about where we're going. And part of that is I do believe, and remember, I'm a technology kid who still serves tech media telecom clients, and who has now seen a bit of what I think AI can start to do.
Mhm.
And I think when you start to understand, and this is not about can Apple Intelligence read my text messages and autocorrect? Like, that's not what we're talking about. I can give you the example of, it's interesting, of something I saw recently from Salesforce, but it will change customer experience. It will change the nature of work in ways that we're only first starting to understand. But what that means is it's a unique moment where we get to reimagine what our clients look like, what industries look like. And as you do that, and you think about going from that reimagination to the rewiring of these institutions to deliver on that, those are some of the trickiest transformations you could ever imagine. And the scale of the opportunity, when you combine with the difficulty of the dive, right? That just yells McKinsey. It just yells McKinsey. And so, and when you think about the way this is going to evolve, and some people, oh my God, it's going to go, this is going to take the decade from now. We're going to look back 10 years from now and go, I can't believe, as much as I teased about the fax machines, we're not going to understand what the world looked like from here to when the fax machines came out 10 years from now. And so that level of change and the speed at which it's going to happen, I am just so bullish on what the next 10 years look like.
Love that. I love that. I also think too, Eric, you mentioned sort of the, where people join us in their careers. And I think it's true that we do have like your story. Marie also came in as an undergraduate. I came from graduate school. We often, do hire folks from early in their career. But to your point on the pace and scale of change, we also are going to need experts to help us navigate some of this. Maybe share some thoughts on who are the kinds of experts that we hire, and how do they sort of fit into the McKinsey culture, which can be a really different thing, right? If you haven't, as you said, grown up at the firm.
It is super. I would say it's super difficult. It's hard to come into this place, after having a full career someplace else, in part because the culture is so strong, and so learning the culture is not easy. If you do figure that out, some of the folks that we brought in are unbelievable. Like, I think we had the first CTO from AWS. We had one of the guys that kind of was the instrumental engineer on the Tesla batteries for the Tesla vehicle. Like, so we bring in truly some of the most incredible. And if you had Rodney Zemmel here, who leads kind of the rewiring of the firm and our kind of DNA, our digital practice externally, he would talk about 10Xers, right?
Mhm.
The former CTO of Amazon is a 10Xer. He can have a conversation with a CIO or CTO of any and talk about what that's like. What is it like to build something of that size and scale? What is it like to think about the technology and how, like, there are certain people that when we get them from the outside, because of that just tremendous expertise, if we get them in front of a client and then, right, because what they do is they give hope to what is possible, to that reimagination.
Yep.
And then they help us kind of bring the fullness of the firm behind it. It's a pretty magical thing.
I love that. I think too, we also have lots of career changers who come to consulting, right? I mean, you had your sort of moment of transition quite early. It was actually before you started your professional career, just coming out of university. But I know we also have folks who have had careers in, I don't know, teaching, have done different things. And that's part of the magic too, I think, is we embrace critical thinkers who are curious and hungry and, as Eric said earlier, like to do hard things. So we often get the folks who, you know, would never have thought that a career in consulting was for them. Don't count yourself out. I think that's a piece of advice we often give people.
One
Yeah,
of the
that,
associates that I worked side by side with when I was a BA used to intimidate me to no end. He was like this, tenured professor of physics from Yale. And I'm like, he could have, like, I mean, how am I supposed to sit next? Like, it was just totally intimidating. And talk about a towering talent. It was amazing.
Yes,
yeah,
we've all had that. That's the insecure
The-
overachiever, the belief that
exactly. The
you're
moment where
you're
you think,
never ever the smartest person in any
how
room.
did I get here? Exactly, exactly,
Ever.
exactly. But you said one of my favorite things, Blair, right? Which is, if you know what you want to do, come join McKinsey, because we do
Yep.
everything. And if you want to work on sustainability, if you want to work on AI, if you want to work in banking and consumer goods and marketing, we do it all. If you don't know what you want to do, like that was my camp for sure when I joined 21 years ago, join McKinsey, because you can do everything. You can try out different things and see where your passion leads you.
Right. You got to put in the work. I think we would say, I
Yes.
think we'd all agree that, we have a lot of
Don't come here
autonomy
because
here.
it's 9 to 5.
Yeah, it's not 9 to 5. It's not 9 to 5. Eric, how have you balanced that throughout your life, right? You've had to have some level of sustainability, whatever you want to call it, to be running to work every day. It's not an easy job. You've run here for most of your 27 years. How do you manage that?
So I think there's two things. What do I do for myself personally? And then what do I do from the family point of view? Look, I sometimes tease, I said, I'm not sure I would win a Father of the Year award all that many times, in part because I'm not there as often as I would like to be for all the moments that I should be there for. But I think if my daughter or my two boys were on this call, what they would say is I never missed an important moment in their life, and that the quality of the time we spent was incredible. And, one of the things that for us has been super important as a family is we go skiing almost every weekend. And so no matter where I am in the world, my assistant knows I have to be back between December 15th and the end of March on the West Coast no later than 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Because at that point I can get home, I can wait for them to get home from school, and then we can go up. And it gets more complicated as they've gotten older and one's out of the house. But that has been amazing time. And it's sort of a joke because the first 2.5 hours of that trip up to the mountains, they have their headsets on and I'm busy doing calls. But we hit a point, where there's no more cell phone service, and they know and they love it. And then we're just family. And by the way, I will sometimes even take those calls like when I'm on the chairlift. And then all of a sudden my youngest will say, "Hey Dad, I think it's time to go to the backside." And I kind of look at him, and just what that means is there's no cell phone service on the backside.
Exactly.
So he's telling me it's time for you. And so we have found a way to make the quality of the time to be really special, whether that's vacations, whether that's the things we do on weekends. The other thing I do a lot of is I play golf, and I no longer play with the friends I used to play with every Saturday and Sunday. The rest of the year, I play with my two boys. And that's just time you can't, like, those are moments that are just magic together, and we go on trips together as a result. So I think that's how I made it work for them. For me, besides doing those things with them, the skiing and the golf and doing a bunch of golf with buddies, I am super religious about going to the gym every day. If poor Sylvia were on this call, she would say, I really give her a hard time because no matter what happens, she's got to find an hour and a half somewhere between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. that I can go to the gym. And that keeps me mentally aware. It gives me a lot of energy. I feel better. I think a lot of the time I'm in the gym. Some of the craziest ideas I have come from when I'm on the bike or on the treadmill or outside running. Like, those things make a difference. So I think that's kind of how I've been able to manage it. The reality is I love what I do, right? The reason I run to work is not because I love what I do. Gary Pincus, who's been a dear friend and a mentor, he always had this expression, it's more than a job, but less than a life. And for me, it's way closer to life than it is to, I don't know how to separate the two. I've always articulated, I have two families. I have my actual family, my 3 kids, my wonderful wife, our dog, like, this is my family. But then I have this McKinsey family too. And like, this one gets a lot of the time and attention, and this one does a lot of the sacrifice, but they get a lot of the spoils. And so that's kind of how it all works. But I kind of can't separate the two.
I love that. And Eric, I have never told you this story, but I think it's appropriate in front of 583 of our closest friends to share this with you. But This was several years ago. I don't remember where it was, but I got up to go to the hotel gym and jumped on a Peloton and was pissed because it was totally uncalibrated. So I had to work so hard for like the easiest level ever, right? Like I was dying and it was at like, beginner times a million. And I'm sweating and I'm probably swearing. It wasn't good. I have my AirPods in, so I can't hear anything else. And I look over and it's Eric Kutcher working out next to me. I was like, oh no. Talk about career limiting. I immediately
I'm in the gym every day.
The only thing I cared about though was being like, just so you know, man, I can actually bike at a lot higher RPMs than this. It's the bike. It's the bike,
So,
not me.
I'm glad you're as competitive as I am. So for Thanksgiving, we actually were in the Peloton studio.
Oh,
So I
fun.
called
Oh,
some
that's
friends that are over there. And so now we had like this special silver. So we were literally on screen. And of course, I had like a whole bunch of McKinsey folks that figured this out because they saw me in the ride and the amount of crap I took for that. But I was super happy with my finish.
Oh, see, I was not happy with mine that day. So we'll have to meet in a hotel gym again someday and I'll prove to you that I
All
can
right.
actually
You're
cycle
on. You're
faster.
on.
Amazing. Well, for it's December 18th. It's quite late for us here in Europe, so I think
Yes.
we are slowly starting to wrap up, and we've heard so many amazing tips from you already today, Eric. They were all golden. I've taken a lot of notes. But coming back to the original questions we had around trust and building trust-based relationships, what's your number one advice for that, and what's your number one don't do?
Sorry, tips for what it broke up for a moment.
To build trust-based relationships.
Look, I think the number one thing is to have no self-orientation. I think the number one thing to make sure you don't build trust-based relationships is be self-oriented, right? If people think you're in it because it's best for you, they don't trust you. If they think you're in it best for them and you're looking out for them, they will trust you.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like the secret.
Was there a time recently that you had to do that you had to sort of show someone that you were more focused on them than on yourself?
I mean, I think the reality is, Blair, it's like every day,
I know.
right? Every day that I'm interacting with a client, like I mean, look, I had a pretty tough exchange with a partner over the course of a weekend where he had joined a call that we were on looking at something internal to the firm. And at the end, I asked him, I said, you've been pretty quiet. There were a bunch of senior partners. I said, you've been pretty quiet. Any thoughts? He goes, no, I didn't. I think this is a really nice conversation. And then he sent me this note, and I was in Hawaii with my wife for her 50th. I'm sure she loves that I just said that. And
Sorry,
I
Laura.
I wake up super early in the morning, and there's this mail that is like super heavy and I would argue pretty hurtful. I read it 2 times and I was like, it really opened up some wounds for me. And I was like, how do I respond to him? And I responded in a way that I thought was appropriately vulnerable. And he responded back, and I just said, I got to make a phone call. And we spent an hour. By the way, I don't have if you ask Sylvia, an hour on my calendar does not exist.
I know, which is why we're really grateful we've gotten almost done with you now, which is amazing.
And so he got it. He got the fact that it was entirely about how do I help him better understand what's going on, how to feel better about that was, and I did 3 of those last week where you just give up everything else in the calendar because that individual in that moment needs something. And that is a bit of running to trouble. Right. And I don't know that there's a day where that doesn't happen.
I love that. I love the running to trouble. Thanks for joining us. Thanks
you,
for giving us
Eric.
almost an hour of time you don't have. We know you don't have, but I know you love talking about this firm, what
I
it
do.
means to you.
I love the firm. I love the firm.
I know you do. I know you do. We'll get you a t-shirt. No, we won't, actually. No, we won't.
He probably has already a few, Blair.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you all for joining
Thank
us. To those celebrating various holidays that are upcoming, hope you do the most important thing, which is spend time with people you love. Whether we're lucky enough to spend a lot of time with people we love where we work, but find the people you love wherever you are, spend time with them, and please join us for an upcoming episode. Today was fun. Eric, thank you.
Thank you all. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Bye all.